Hi everyone, it's William. This is the 1921 Grand Duke Dmitri Diary series, and we are up to the 22nd of February, and you could say this is a very special episode of the series. A lot going on, a lot of interesting things. Unfortunately, we have Mean Dmitri in this particular diary entry, but as always, what can I say except he who is without sin, let him cast the first stone. All right, and he will be abetted in his meanness on this occasion by none other than the Queen of Denmark, Alexandrine. So before we start on that, I thought I was doing some work on my Sanatorium Shuts Out Facebook page, and I came across an old article I wrote, a series of 3 articles between 2000 and 2001 for a periodical called the Davoser Review, and this is Leben und Sterben in Davos, so life, living and dying in Davos. Dmitri Romanov in Sanatorium Shuts Out 1939 to 1942. I believe you can still purchase them, at least the article itself, from the Davoser Review, if anybody is interested in. And there's some photographs I thought I might as well show. This is Dmitri's 1940 passport photo. He had his Nansen passport renewed while he was in Davos. Here is his funeral cortege. These are photocopies of the article, so I actually have the magazine in print, so I should have looked for that instead of these photocopies. This was his doctor, whom he had an interesting relationship with, Gustav Maurer. Here's the doctor's wife, whom in typical Dmitri fashion he became friendly with, although certainly not in any untoward way. She was just a nice person, and he was more or less alone, and she treated him kindly, and he appreciated it. Here is an illustration of he had 3 surgeries while he was there, plus a smaller procedure, and this is an example of a surgery he had that was pioneered by Dr. Maurer, and I won't go into details about that, but you can see there's this apparatus that a patient would have for a while in their chest. Okay, so let's get started. 26th February 1921, Tuesday, Copenhagen, English Mission. I wrote in the morning and around 12 o'clock went to Oga's. We went together to Christian's, where they were waiting lunch. Both Christian and Edini were amazingly sweet to me and treated me completely like a member of the family. The king asked a great many questions about the war, and then, of course, the conversation shifted to the revolution, and then finally to the death of the poor sovereign. Christian said nothing himself, he just listened to me, and it was difficult to tell whether or not he believed the information. I only found out later that my words had by no means convinced him, and he continues to nourish some hope of their rescue. After lunch, I went directly home and took a walk with Lucia. We stopped by Audrey Parr's. She announced to me that if only I decided to leave for Paris on 1st March, we could travel together, because she herself needed to go sometime around that date. I had tea at home, after which I took a nap. I dined at 6 o'clock with the Marlings at the home of Admiral Richelieu. He's an admiral of the Siamese fleet, and at one time even occupied the post of Prime Minister in Bangkok. Make a note of that. His wife is a woman of enormous size, with a fleet of daughters of the same displacement as her. The dinner was a benefit for the royal couple. There were tons of people, and I knew almost none of them. My saving grace was that I was seated between Edini and Madame Scavenius, the wife of the foreign minister. Adini was terribly sweet, and after dinner we sat together for a very long time, and Countess Blank sat down with us. We had a very nice chat and laughed a lot, to the great annoyance of the voluminous hostess, who wanted to introduce guests to Adini and didn't know how to break in. When the ball started, I sat with Audrey, and then again with Adini. Supper was richly served, but then eaten standing up, selon d'habitude danoise. Overall, thanks to Adini, I had an amazingly good time and got home only around 4 a.m. Poor old Charles Murray is going completely mad with the life we lead, going out every evening. Poor old Charles Murray indeed. That's me, actually, not Dmitri. All right, so, big day, big day. We start out with Olga coming to pick Dmitri up, and off they go. He doesn't say where, probably the, how is it pronounced, Amalienborg Palace, I would guess. Christian X and Alexandrine receive both of them for lunch. And let's see. They were amazingly sweet to me and treated me completely like a member of the family. This was rather different from the reception that he got from George and Mary, the King and Queen of Great Britain, when he was in London. So clearly he's delighted. And I think Christian was in his 50s and Adini was in her late 40s. So they weren't so much older than him. So it's interesting what form the conversation took, that the king really wanted to know about the war. So, you know, I'm not sure what he wanted to hear from Dmitri about the war, whether it was about Dmitri's actual participation in the invasion of East Prussia and the battle and the retreat, the Battle of Cauchin, or if he wanted a more general sense, you know, questions like, was it a good decision? Well, he wouldn't ask that. Obviously, it was a bad decision to go to war, or how the Tsar had come to the decision to do that. I don't know. I wish I did. I can imagine all sorts of things. And then they talk about the revolution, which of course Dmitri did not witness firsthand. So I would guess that, yeah, what the king wanted was his assessment of the whole situation. And then finally, the death of the poor sovereign, the word that is used in Russian more often than anything else is not king or tsar or emperor, but gasudar, which means sovereign. So that's how I've translated it. A lot of times it's translated emperor, because the empress is called imperatrica, empress, but the emperor is called sovereign. Don't ask me why. So he's referring to Nicholas II, and Christian wants to know his opinion on the death of the poor sovereign. And it may be something that Dmitri brought up himself, because as we know, he was very much invested in the outcome of the Sokolov investigation, and he entirely believed it. And of course, the Dowager Empress, Maria Fyodorovna, did not. So Christian had undoubtedly spoken to her, and apparently had picked up her skepticism with the results of the Sokolov investigation. And so he's still holding out hope that they will be rescued, Nicholas and Alexandra and the children. And he was being very neutral about it during the actual conversation. He wasn't showing whether he believed it or not. I guess he probably didn't want to get Dmitri going on that topic, which Dmitri was quite passionate about. And undoubtedly Christian knew that. So he wanted to hear what Dmitri had to say, but he, I'm sure, didn't want to get into an argument about it or anything like that. So Dmitri only finds out later that Christian, what does he say? My words had by no means convinced him. Okay, then a brief interval between events, his usual daily walk, and surprise, surprise, they stop by Audrey Parr's, he and Lucia. And Audrey Parr says, oh, by the way, I happen to be going to Paris too, and if you leave on such and such date, then we can go together. Ah, okay. So Dmitri is, he sees where she's going with this. She announced to me, he says, that this was the situation, and we will be learning more about that later. Now, the next event is tea at the home of, tea at the home of the Marlings at the English missions. He had tea at home. Then he took a nap. He's been, as we noted in the last diary entry, he's been awfully worn out lately. And then they had an early dinner at the home of Admiral Richelieu. And Admiral Richelieu was Danish. Believe it or not, his family had left France in I believe, the 17th century and gone to Norway. And then from Norway had gone to Denmark. And so his name was actually Andreas Duplessis de Richelieu. He was 69 at this time. Dmitri calls him Admiral, but he puts Admiral in quotes. And then he says he's an admiral in the Siamese fleet, and at one time he was the prime minister of Siam, or modern-day Thailand, in Bangkok. And he's wrong about that. Admiral Richelieu was indeed an admiral in the Thai fleet, and a very close friend of King Chulalongkorn, and a big-time businessman in Thailand. He opened what was considered the first Western-style hotel in Bangkok. So if any of you are taking a trip to Thailand to get away from the winter weather, then think of Andreas Duplessis de Richelieu. I have no idea if that hotel is still open. I don't even know what the name of it was. And he was such a close friend of Chulalongkorn and of the Crown Prince that he was given all kinds of concessions. Railroad concessions, logging concessions, even ownership of the electric company that provided electricity to Bangkok. And what he was not the prime minister or a mere admiral, but he was the commander-in-chief of the Thai Navy. And not for very long, from 1900 to 1901. There is, of course, a Wikipedia article about this man, and so I read it and found it fascinating, and so, have a look. Maybe I'll try to post the link on my Grand Duke Dmitri Diaries Facebook page. So, a wealthy man, but he was about to come up against some turmoil. In the next year, 1922, he would have a big business loss in Denmark, and the Danish government would hold him accountable. Maybe there were stockholders, I don't know, and he would get a big fine in 1923. Apparently the official ruling that he was negligent in his business practice in some way. Not corrupt, well, who knows, but the court found that he was negligent. So here we come to the wife. Oi, the one whom Dmitri is not very kind to. I'm sure he was perfectly courteous to her at the dinner, and her name was Dagmar. She was Thai. She wasn't Thai, she was Danish. Her maiden name is spelled Lerche. Lerche, in the French style, but I don't know what it would be in Danish. She was quite a bit younger than her husband. He was 69. She was 58 that year. And they had, Dmitri talks about their fleet of daughters. Well, they also had 3 sons, but in the middle, the 2 eldest and the 1 youngest were sons, and in the middle you had 3 daughters, Dagmar, Agnes, and Lillian, and they were at this time between 25 and 18 years of age. And so I looked at a picture. The Wikipedia article on Admiral Richelieu includes a picture of his wife in Thailand with some Thai ladies, and she is not at all a rotund woman, not at all. Quite an elegant figure from what you can see in that particular photograph. But then that was 20 years before this diary entry. And apparently Dmitri found the daughters to be, unfortunately, overweight as well. Not that that's, I shouldn't use the word unfortunately, but it's unfortunate that that was one of his primary prejudices, that he made fun of large people, of obese people. And yeah, so it's still a thing to this day. It's unfortunate, but there you go. And so he was seated at dinner. You know, it's the usual thing with him. He doesn't like to be around strangers, big groups of strangers. That makes him uncomfortable. So he tells us that his saving grace was that he was seated between 2 people that he knew, to wit, the Queen and Madame Scavenius, who we've met previously, and the Queen was again terribly sweet, and apparently Marie-Louise wasn't there. Go figure. And so this time he sat together with the Queen. He didn't dance, so when dinner was over, he sat together with the Queen and Countess someone, and I don't know why, but he either erased the Countess's name or he never filled it in the first place. He left an empty space the size of a name, but didn't put anything in it, or else managed to erase that. And why? I don't know. He does that from time to time with names. It's not that it's illegible, it's that it's simply not there, even though the empty space is there. So anyway, the 3 of them sat there, they chatted, they laughed, and the poor admiral's wife naturally wanted to present guests to the Queen, but the 3 of them were being, they were not being helpful. They were not helping her to do that. So that, that's what I mean when I say they were a little on the on the mean side, a little on the rude side. And Dmitri even puts, what is it with this Countess? He even puts an exclamation point. He says, "We sat together for a very long time, and Countess blank sat down with us," exclamation point. Okay, so then the ball starts. He's not dancing, so he sits a while with Audrey, the apparently quite flirtatious Audrey, and then maybe Audrey went to dance, because he tells us he sat again with Adini. Richly, when he says supper was richly served, he puts richly in quotes. I'm not sure why. I understand the concept of rich food, but supper being richly served, I don't know what that means. And then, selon d'habitude danoise. I just hate trying to pronounce French because I'm so bad at it. So they ate standing up, which he has previously also noted is the Danish manner or the Danish style of eating, I guess, supper or lunch or, yeah, whatever. And because of Adini, he had a really amazingly good time, getting home around 4 a.m. And then finally, a little bit of sympathy for Charles Murray Marling. Sir Charles Marling was not a party animal. I think this is part of the reason why his wife was a little too attached to Dmitri. He was older than her. I think he was about 15 years older than her. And he was not a terribly social person. He was kind of the model of the reserved British gentleman, all business. And so his wife, didn't have much. She was a very social person, and she didn't have much occasion for going out and doing anything that wasn't something that Sir Charles really felt that he had to do as a diplomat. Maybe this is why he wasn't a wild success as a diplomat. He was more sort of a middling figure in diplomatic circles, and maybe simply because he wasn't, he wasn't a very social person. He was better with the kind of serious side of being a diplomat. All right, so that is it for today. We'll have another very interesting diary entry tomorrow. I'm trying to decide if the king and queen are in it again. Trying to remember. I should have reviewed it before I embarked on this. Actually, I can just take a quick look. I've got my laptop and see what the subject is. The Vedals come back into things. I knew there was some royalty involved. There's a meeting with Ksenia, with Grand Duchess Ksenia. And there's a bit of faux pas, a bit of an embarrassing situation with Marie-Louise. Yes, I remember this one. It's very interesting, so you'll want to come back, and I'll see you next time. Bye.